All right, so we've talked about the big fat cats of industry who've been the main profiteers of the Industrial Revolution. But what about the little guy? What about the everyday worker, the blue collar man who rolls up his sleeve and gets down to the nitty gritty every day? It's actually him who provides the footwork for the Industrial Revolution. It is the labor of everyday workers that leads to this huge revolution. A lot of this comes in the form of immigrants. Immigration, you can see on the screen, is moving from one country to another. And this is to differentiate from the term migration, which is moving within the borders of a country. So when we get to the Great Depression, we're going to talk a lot about migrant workers. So when the Depression struck in the United States, we had a lot of people, such as farmers, who would move from one state to another looking for more fertile land. An immigrant is someone who crosses borders of countries. So a lot of labor is coming from immigrants. And so here's kind of what the conditions are like. Entire families, because they're not making much, are forced to work in order to sustain the whole family. Children would go to work and they'd bring their money back home. They'd give it to mom and dad as kind of their contribution to the family's fund. They got no support from government. Remember, this is the laissez-faire idea, social Darwinism, hands off. There's no insurance, there's no welfare. If you're poor, and there's no one there to help you. So how are you going to get out of these circumstances? Well, hopefully you're going to work harder. But unfortunately, this didn't always lead to some yellow brick road of freedom because conditions at work were kind of tough. First, let's look at what work actually was during this time. You can see from this bar graph on the left here, these green bars represent rural population and the blue bars represent urban population. We could think of urban population as city living. So as rural population in the countryside is going down, you could see an inverse proportion. Urban population rather is increasing. So more people are moving to cities, and a lot of that is because that's where the work is. You could also see the corresponding graph on the right. The orange bars show you agricultural workers. These are people who would be set up with farm jobs. This is slowly declining. And what's on the rise? Well, you see professional workers and you see industrial workers, mining, construction, manufacturing. A lot of this is happening in the cities or cities are sprouting up around these industries, in fact. So let's go back and check out the conditions at work. First of all, it's not a 40-hour work week. It's not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Things are cutthroat in this industrial world. These billionaires want to keep making their billions. So we have a long workday. It's 10 to 16 hours. And the weeks are long too. There's no 5-day work weeks. You got to get by. You're scrapping and scraping to get whatever money you can. So you're working 6 to 7 days a week. And the conditions are not all that great. We're going to have a lot of factories above 90 decibels. That's kind of the baseline for where long-term hearing loss you could experience. So we're going to see a lot of noise in factories with machinery just clanking together. It's boring work. It's doing the repetitive motions, same thing over and over and over again. And it's in a stuffy factory. There might be lighting if you're lucky, if the factory's working 24/7. Obviously, there's going to be light on for the nighttime, but the ventilation is poor. You might have a couple windows, but you're not going to have a circulation of cool air. And you're not going to get too much training. And you're not going to have the best equipment. Obviously, it's early in the Industrial Revolution, so equipment is still kind of coming into its own. There's a lot of stuff that's breaking. There's a lot of dangerous conditions. There's no regulations for safety manufacturing of things. So a lot of equipment breaks, and a lot of it happens when people are close by and they get injured or killed. You can see the statistic on your screen. 675 people die a week in 1882. That is absolutely insane. Discipline is tough. There's many factories where you're going to get fired just for smiling. If you talk to another person next to you who's doing their job, you could get fired. Why? There's so many people moving into cities looking for jobs in industry that you're not special. You just get fired and bring in someone else who will do the job as the manager or the owner sees fit. So it's not just men that are part of the workforce. We're going to start to see women and children that are forced to work, and this is really to make ends meet. Women are hired for simple jobs. We're going to see most of this as piecework. This is when you're paid a set amount for each piece you produce. Okay, simple enough. So if I'm manufacturing, let's say, pencils, and boy, I wish I had one handy. Here we go. Let's say we're manufacturing pencils. We could look at different parts of the pencils and know that there's different parts that go into it. The inner core of it is graphite. We have wood surrounding it, a kind of painted outer core, something stamped on the pencil itself. We have a rubber eraser and a piece of metal that holds the eraser to the pencil itself. So piecework might operate like this. In a pencil factory, there's certain people who are designated to make certain parts of this pencil. I may be in charge of making these little metal pieces that wrap around and connect the eraser to the pencil itself. Well, this might be a simple enough job where I could take it home and do it too, which a lot of women did with piecework. They got their families involved, younger kids who maybe weren't fit for factories, but they could assemble things at home. And I'm going to get paid 10 cents for every 20 little metal pieces that I produce. This is piecework. It's a set amount paid for each piece you produce. Now, women largely are going to get taken advantage of in this. The higher paid jobs are reserved for men, so women are going to get paid mere pennies to the dollar that men get. And children are also taken advantage of too in this system. Many children are giving up their entire childhood to work. And this name I don't need you to commit to memory right now because we're going to see him coming up again when we talk about great reforms. But Jacob Riis, he was a police reporter who started to use pictures to produce the need for reform in the workplace. So he'd go around with a camera and he'd look at these awful conditions where people were getting their hands smashed in the shuttles of looms and sewing machines, and he'd document that and print it in newspapers of like children working or going out into a coal mine and their faces all covered in black coal dust. And he started to let the public know, hey, here's how bad the conditions are. So right now, I'm just going to pause for a minute and let you answer a question that's going to help you think about what we're getting into next. And here's why that matters. If we look at a store like Walmart, started by Sam Walton, huge corporation. They're always in the news for workers' violations. There's a lot of claims that their employees have against the company, that they're being their wages are being slashed, like you could see in this political cartoon, or they're being taken advantage of, or they need more benefits or something like that. So it's often accused that Walmart has grown into some big corporation, some monopoly, in fact, that is cutting down on mom and pop businesses, that is not treating women equally with men. There's some disproportionate salaries being given out. So they're in the news a lot for some of these things. So we're going to talk about factories that are offering more pay than most regular folk could hope to find elsewhere. And this is really what attracts people to work in industrial settings, in factories, in a clothing factory, in a mill, whatever you're making. You're getting paid more than you would for a job in a rural country setting. By the end of 1800s, since families are working, 1 in 5 children between the ages of 10 and 6 are employed. So if you notice by that stat, we have no labor laws, but it's really the child's pay that could be a difference between a family going hungry and a family being able to put food on the table. So it's really of the utmost importance. We're going to look at this term philanthropy that's down here. It's loosely equated with charity. So when you see someone who's a philanthropist, you could think that they are a very charitable person. Okay, so philanthropic really just means charitable. Many people, since they're not able to get enough wages to put food on the table for their family, they're starting to rely on private charities for food, shelter, clothing, a whole wide range of things because they just can't afford it. So you can hopefully probably guess from previous sections that social Darwinists absolutely hated charities. Remember, they believed in the idea of laissez-faire economics, hands off, that the strongest will survive and the weakest are meant to fail and they should not be helped. In fact, they thought that poverty came from personal weakness and that charitable giving, it's really not going to help someone out. It's really just going to encourage more laziness. So here's factory work. It actually lowered the prices of many goods because factories could churn stuff out so quickly, they'd get more customers and sell in larger volumes, which means you could then lower the price and hopefully sell more and make your money up not from high prices, but from a large quantity of goods sold. Factory workers actually did not earn enough money to buy the products that were being made. So here's one of the great ironies of the Industrial Revolution. So we get what's called a disparity of wealth. Now, disparity is just a fancy pants term for gap. So we get a growing gap in social classes. The rich start to get richer and the poor start to get poorer. So this is called a disparity of wealth. They start to separate in how much money they actually have. You could see the statistic that by 1890, the richest 9% of Americans held nearly 75% of all the nation's wealth. So 9% of people have 75% of the money. That's crazy unbalanced here. So workers, they started to resent the extravagant lifestyles that their owners had. So if they wore nice clothes or they had good meals or lived in big houses, the factory workers are like, what the heck? We're the ones that are doing all the work. Why is this person living an extravagant life? And they started to get a little bit mad. So the seed is planted for a little bit of hatred. If you were poor, you really started to hope and believe that the future would be better. That's really all that you could do. Some people got politically active and they looked to relieve their lower class status by advocating for a new economic system called socialism. So, unlike capitalism, socialism is going to look at public control instead of private control. So, it's no longer the individual citizen who gets to pick what's made, who they're selling it to, and for how much, but there's going to be a group that really gets together and decides this, and we'll see how that works. Socialism is going to look for a redistribution of wealth, and this is really why a lot of people opposed it. It's a belief that people should cooperate instead of competing, and that there should be an even playing field. And it's really started by German philosophers Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848, and they believed that all economies go through kind of a natural cycle or progression. So if you start off as a capitalistic society, the natural flow of things is you turn socialist, or you have public control instead of private, and then you turn into communism, and that's like a natural evolution, and that will naturally happen throughout all economic cycles in the world. So here's socialism illustrated, and this is why a lot of people didn't like it. The upper class who was in power saw the redistribution of wealth as a major threat to them and a threat to political order. So if you redistribute wealth, well, the top 9% of people who own 75% of the nation's wealth, it's like someone's going to be reaching into their pocket to give money to the poor who don't have money, to try to even out this disparity and get a level playing field. So if the people in power aren't really in favor of it, it's going to be a big struggle trying to get it to become adopted nationwide. So socialism wasn't really a popular movement. Most rejected this idea. Instead, people thought that they could improve their lot in life by forming unions.